The Buccaneers play their most complete game of the season and send the Jags packing in a brutal loss. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Tuesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, we want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. Right now, you can join the Locked On Bucs Insiders, where you're going to get news, the inside scoop, and exclusive content delivered directly to your phone, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. To join the Insiders, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to sign up. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. On this episode, we are talking about the win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Biggest takeaways from the game. But first, we have to talk about our biggest moment. And it's as if it was right out of a Hollywood script. The biggest moment in this one, without a doubt, to me, was the interception by Devin White. Of all the people to have an interception in this game, Devin White comes up with it. So here's the situation. The Buccaneers had a 3-0 lead, and Jacksonville had their first possession of the game. Now, they were facing a 3rd and 15 following a first down fumble by their running back, who then promptly recovered the ball. I believe it was C.J. Henderson that fumbled the ball, but he recovered. It was a 5-yard loss, incomplete pass on second down, facing 3rd and 15 from the Buccaneers' 47-yard line. So not quite in field goal range yet, but Trevor Lawrence tries to throw a rope for a first down to Washington, and it is read absolutely perfectly by Devin White. He breaks on the ball, intercepts it, falls down, gets up, runs back, and returns it to the Buccaneers' 44-yard line. And that was a huge play for a couple of reasons. And first and foremost, it was because that it stole a possession where the Jaguars looked like they might be able to get into scoring range. I mean, think about it. Even a 12-yard pass on that play puts the ball at the 35-yard line. The Jags potentially could have kicked. Now, they did miss a 52-yarder later on in the game, but that was facing the other direction. The wind wasn't as bad in the direction that they were heading. So you could have been looking at a potential 3-3 game at that point. But instead, Devin White takes the ball, gives it back to a Bucs offense that moved the ball really, really well, and then stalled out inside the 10-yard line. But one of the other reasons that was such a big play was it was a sorely needed splash play by a guy who was in the news all week long for all the wrong reasons. Devin White, since last Sunday, when he was listed as inactive, was talked about as a guy who was selfish, a guy who didn't want to play because he was losing his starting job to KJ Britt and was becoming a rotational player. They claimed it was the foot that flared up and he wasn't going to be able to go. He spoke with the media about everything that had happened, but there was the perception at that point that Devin White was a selfish player. He was not a team player. He had kind of isolated himself from the team because of those reasons. And then he sets foot on the field on Sunday and makes a massive play in one of his first snaps on the field. KJ Britt started on defense on that drive. Devin White came in later and then makes that play. And not only that, but then the Buccaneers were able to take that takeaway and then get into the end zone with Mike Evans' first touchdown of the game 11 plays later. So that right there set the tone for the rest of the day. Devin White's interception boosted the defense, boosted the offense, and all of a sudden the Jaguars, instead of being able to potentially get a 3-3 tie, are facing a 2-possession deficit, and they never, ever recovered. A couple of other key moments in this one. On the next Jacksonville possession, they missed that field goal that I mentioned just a moment ago, which could have made it a 10-3 game. You're still down by 1 possession, but all of a sudden you got some points on the board. You orchestrated a scoring drive to respond after that turnover, but now it's still 10-0, and you've given the Buccaneers fantastic field position. It ends up a 6-point swing because Chase McLaughlin is able to bury a field goal just a couple of plays later. That was his second of the game. Now it's still a 2-possession game, but all of a sudden the Bucs have 3 possessions and 3 scores, while Jacksonville has 2 possessions, a turnover, and a missed field goal. Then Antoine Winfield Jr. once again, he gets an interception on the next Jaguars possession. The Jags had taken the ball with just under 2.5 minutes left. And with a score now, even though it's still a tight game, it's still a 2-possession game, 13-0. If the Jags go down there and score a touchdown and then get the second half kickoff, all of a sudden you're looking at the Jags being able to flip this game completely on its head, where it looks like the Buccaneers are dominating. All of a sudden they're trailing. That's how quickly things can change in the NFL. Instead, it's a 2nd and 5 play, and Winfield makes a diving interception of Lawrence, his second interception of the day, gives the Bucs the ball at their own 35 with just under 2 minutes left, but all 3 timeouts, 7 plays, and 49 seconds later, Mike Evans head tops, double coverage, gets his second touchdown of the game. Another big moment, Devin White showing up again, this time alongside Yaya Diaby on the Jaguars' opening second half drive. Strip sack of Trevor Lawrence. That leads to another Buccaneers touchdown just 5 plays later. And then finally, Zion McCollum, who, what does this guy have to do to get an interception? Literally had the ball bounce out of his arms in the end zone on one that could have potentially been a pick 6 of over 100 yards, but he did have a forced fumble that was recovered by, I don't know who else, Antoine Winfield Jr. All of that added up to a 30-12 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Buccaneers, who at one point were 4-7, are now 8-7, and heading into a week where if they beat the New Orleans Saints, they will be heading to the postseason for the 4th consecutive year. Coming up next, I am going to talk about a couple of my biggest takeaways from this win. That is next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Score this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. There's no odds quite yet for the Bucs and Saints showdown in Tampa this week, but the red-hot Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now at plus 5,500 odds to win the Super Bowl, which is 12th in the NFL and 5th in the NFC. Remember, this was one of the leading favorites before the season to end up with the #1 pick in the draft. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and score this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every dayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. It will be a WTSP Wednesday as I'm joined by Evan Kolosky. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories in all of sports every single day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. As we always do on these post-game episodes, some things that I like, some things that I didn't like so much, the big takeaways from everything. And for the second week in a row, I just have a couple of things that I like. There wasn't a whole lot that I didn't like other than kind of the way the offense fizzled out at the end of that game. Defense gave up a couple of late touchdowns. One of them was sparked by one of the worst and most egregious calls I have seen in quite a while. I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But the first thing that I liked is, once again, Baker Mayfield's performance. It was another outstanding game by Baker Mayfield. Finished 26-35 for 283, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers in this one. Even with that perfect passer rating last week against the Green Bay Packers, he did have the fumble early in the game. No turnovers in this one for Baker. And again, we saw more absolutely beautifully placed passes. I will say this. He had 2 turnover-worthy plays. One was a missed touchdown to Mike Evans. Baker threw it over his left shoulder. Mike had cut in towards the right and was looking for the ball on the right side. That one was bobbled and dropped by a Jacksonville defender. And then he had another one where the ball was bobbled. It was a short, quick pass to Trey Palmer. The Jags defender broke on the ball really quickly, wasn't able to corral it. But other than that, Baker Mayfield, again, was throwing receivers open, was hitting guys in stride, was hitting guys on these good timing routes to move the sticks, extend drives, and the Bucs put together quite a few sustained scoring drives in this one. And you see the confidence and the chemistry really starting to build now between him and the rest of the playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. More clutch connections with Chris Godwin, especially on those money downs in those big situations where third down, he was looking for number 14 and converting quite a bit. And here's something that's really kind of cool. The Buccaneers scored 30 plus points in back-to-back weeks now for the first time since weeks 13 and 14 of 2021. They scored 30 points against the Falcons and then 33 against the Bills. That game went into overtime, so they didn't score 30 in regulation in that one, but still finished the game with over 30 points. Now, if they can score 30 or more against the New Orleans Saints this coming Sunday, that will be the first time that they've scored 30 plus 3 weeks in a row since that same stretch in 2021. If you just take the clock back one more week, it was weeks 12 through 14 where they were able to do it. And in fact, they scored 30 plus in weeks 11 through 14 in 2021. So the Bucs offense has been absolutely firing lately. Still looking for that opening drive touchdown. Thought it was going to happen against Jacksonville. They stalled out inside the 10-yard line. But you're starting to really see the playbook open up a little bit, the chemistry be there, the trust be there. It's going to happen. They are going to get that opening drive touchdown. You know what? Bold prediction on a Tuesday. Mark it down. The Bucs score an opening drive touchdown against the New Orleans Saints this coming Sunday. And I'll even double down. It's going to be to Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is going to get an opening drive touchdown against the Saints this week. And the Bucs offense, Dave Canales, is really finding himself in a groove right now. And Baker Mayfield is one of the biggest beneficiaries of that. Something else that I liked, Devin White's performance. And you guys know I'm very strong in my opinions. I'm very strong in my beliefs. I'm very strong in what I see with my eyes. And when I feel a player deserves praise, they get it. When I feel a player deserves criticism, they get it. I may be one of the most critical people of Devin White, not only this season, but especially over the course of about the last week or so. And that guy showed up. He showed up to play and he showed up to send a message. And he looked like that week 1 Devin White that we saw against the Minnesota Vikings. And that Devin White looked like the 2020 playoff Devin White. An interception, a forced fumble, 1.5 sacks, although one of those sacks was overturned because of one of the worst roughing the passer calls I have ever seen, ever in my life. That was atrocious. I don't know what Devin White is supposed to do there. He wrapped him up, he spun him around, and then essentially kind of let go of him and let him hit the ground. He didn't land on top of him. He didn't pile drive him. He didn't spear him. Basically let him down, was cautious about swinging his leg over Beathard's head to not make contact with him before he did his sack dance. And instead, the refs called a flag. Mind you, the next time the Bucs had the ball, Baker Mayfield got hit in the head and neck twice by 2 different players, and there was no flag, but that's neither here nor there. So in the stat book, Devin White officially finished with half of a sack. But to me, that was a 1.5 sack performance by Devin White, plus that interception, plus that forced fumble to strip sack that he shared with Yaya Diaby. That was incredible. Not only does all of that show up on the stat sheet, but stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet was all of the pressure in the early throws that Devin White caused. It just wrecked Lawrence's timing all day long. Again, you go back to that interception on the Jags opening drive. From that moment on, Devin White was dialed in, and he was in the head of Trevor Lawrence. He was coming on blitzes. He almost got a sack. It ended up leading to actually a 15-yard scramble by Trevor Lawrence, but he was about this close to roping Trevor Lawrence down again. He was in that backfield all day long. And again, a lot of that's not going to show up on the stat sheet, but you could tell just by watching the level of impact that Devin White was having on that game. And I'm really, really interested to see the snap counts for this game. As of this recording, those snap counts are not out, but White didn't seem overly rotational as, KJ Britt finished with 1 tackle. Devin White had 4. But again, even those 4 tackles don't tell the story of the impact that he made. That's why stat scouting isn't super reliable. It tells a part of the story, not the entire story. But it seemed like every time you were looking, it was Devin White on the field and not KJ Britt. Maybe this was a we're going to play the hot hand situation. We'll find out more from Todd Bowles as the week progresses. And obviously we'll find out more against New Orleans as to how the two are used. But Devin White had one of his best games of probably the last 2 seasons in this one. And you can argue that this was his best game this season. It's right up there with the Minnesota game, especially considering the circumstances that he was playing under, with all those reports that came out during the week, all of the doubt that was kind of cast on him and his character and his commitment level to this team and this defense. So again, I'll criticize a player when I feel they need criticism. I felt last week, and I felt a lot this season, that Devin White deserved criticism. In this one, he deserves all the praise because he played an absolutely outstanding game. We are going to be handing out game balls for this one. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I'm still keeping an eye on those Foo Fighter seats for next summer. My dad and I are going to go check out our beloved Fighting Illini take on the Ohio State Buckeyes in Columbus in men's basketball. And I might be looking at getting some Celtics Pacers tickets for my son who wants to go see Tatum and Porzingis. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets, and GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It is the place to find last-minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Wrapping things up here on a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Coming up tomorrow, Evan Klosky is going to join the show for WTSP Wednesday. We are going to talk more about this game, look ahead to the Saints, and discuss some reports that came out Sunday morning regarding Baker Mayfield, the Buccaneers, and a new contract. But it's time to hand out game balls. Normally, I have my every livers in the chat handing out game balls of their own. So I'm going to do my normal game ball handouts. Then we're going to do some bonus ones of some people that I feel probably would have been mentioned in the chat. But we're going to start with game ball number one, and it's Antoine Winfield Jr. This dude, all pro, Pro Bowler, best safety in the league. He's him. 3 tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss, an interception, and a fumble recovery. Certainly concerned that he left towards the end of the game, was checked in the blue medical tent for a concussion. Hopefully everything is fine and he doesn't get placed in the protocol. If he does get placed in the protocol, really, really hope that he clears protocol before Sunday's game, because they are going to need him against the New Orleans Saints. But Antoine Winfield Jr. just continues to dominate this season. Game ball number 2, Baker Mayfield, back-to-back fantastic games, 26-35, 283, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, sacked twice, and he avoided about 6 more sacks the way Baker Mayfield normally does. And I'm going to say this right now. Baker Mayfield continues to play the way he has these last 2 games in the playoffs. They're going to go toe-to-toe with anybody that's put in front of them. You put the Baker Mayfield that is performing this way against the 49ers or against the Eagles or against the Lions earlier this season, those games are a whole heck of a lot closer, and the Bucs might even squeak out a win against 1 or 2 of them. This Buccaneers team is hot, and they are hot at the right time. This offense is clicking. They can go up against anyone. This defense is clicking. They can stop just about anyone. It's going to be real interesting to see how all of this shakes out. My third game ball for this one, this might be a little bit of a surprise because this is the first time that I'm mentioning his name in this episode, but Lavonte David, another outstanding game from him. And he was another guy that was all over the field, that was creating pressure, that was taking down ball carriers with ease. He led the team with 8 tackles, had a sack, had a tackle for loss, and he was a huge reason why the only rushing yards that this team had up until the very, very end of the game were Trevor Lawrence scrambles. Like, Lavonte was all over the place. He is the ageless wonder. He is the NFL equivalent to Benjamin Button. The guy is aging in reverse, and he just gets better every single year. He's like a fine wine. Lavonte David, another unbelievably outstanding game. My fourth game ball is going to go to Mike Evans. Just give him the gold jacket. Can we, if he does a retirement tour where everyone knows that it's his last season, can we just give him the gold jacket at halftime in week 18? 7 receptions on 8 targets for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is now 3 touchdowns away from setting a new career high, and he's got 2 games in which to do it. And how about this? Mike Evans is one of 5 players all time with 5 or more seasons with 12 or more touchdown receptions. The only other players to do it were Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, and Marvin Harrison. And what do those 4 receivers all have in common? Yep, you guessed it. They're all Hall of Famers. Mike Evans is a first ballot Hall of Famer, period. End of discussion. It's over. It's a knockout punch. Mike Evans going to Canton. All right, a few bonus game balls. Obviously, Devin White. I wanted to give him one of the regular game balls, but I also felt that Lavonte deserved some love there and deserved the shout out because of the game that he had. He really made some absolutely incredible plays. I did spend a lot of time talking about Devin in that second segment, so I wanted to give Lavonte his flowers, but Devin White absolutely deserving of a game ball. The next one, Yaya Diaby. I talked about this, within the last couple of weeks during Stash It and Trash It, and I said it wasn't a full trash it, but there was a lot of hype after a couple of really good games about Yaya Diaby, and then he kind of fell off. And I said that he needs to step up and have a huge game and kind of get back to that level that he was playing earlier in the season. And did he ever? He stepped up his game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, had 5 tackles, 1.5 sack, a forced fumble recovery, and 2 tackles for loss. Huge game for the rookie out of Louisville, Yaya Diaby. And then my final bonus game ball, Chris Godwin. It wasn't the eye-popping numbers that he had last week, but again, he was the money down guy, the third down guy. We desperately need a catch. Baker Mayfield's looking at number 1-4, finished with 6 receptions for 78 yards. He was clutch all game long, especially that last drive. The Buccaneers faced a couple of third downs. It was Chris Godwin getting those receptions, moving the chains, and getting the Bucs in a position where they can kneel the game out and send all the Bucs fans home happy for Christmas. With that, I'm going to bid you all a fair adieu. Drop your game balls in the comment section. I'm not sure who else you're going to name after I just rattled off all of those, but again, the most complete game we have seen from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. I'm not kidding. If the Buccaneers offense and defense can play complementary football in the playoffs the way they did against the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're going to beat whatever team they have to face coming out of the NFC East, whether that's Dallas or Philadelphia. The Buccaneers team that played on Sunday against Jacksonville can beat either one. It was that good of a performance. Make sure you're coming back tomorrow to hear what Evan has to say about this game, as well as the Baker Mayfield contract speculation. Until then, please make sure you're checking out everything that's going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs and at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Join Subtext.com/Locked On Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you all so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.